Okay, we will reconvene the Board of Trustees of Calbright College after what probably is our shortest executive session ever. The first item up is the item 5.1, the vote on the executive hire. We will now take public comments for this agenda item. Are there any public comments? All right, hearing none, the Governing Board of the California Online Community College District will now vote on the contract for the Chief Finance and Administrative Officer. Under California law, as the Board President, I am obligated to orally announce the monetary provisions of the contract and the values of the same. Once I announce the monetary benefits of the employment agreement and the associated values, the Board will vote on the contract to hire the respective candidate. This contract for Nicholas Schweitzer to serve as the Chief Finance and Administrative Officer. The agreement provides for a 3-year term and a base salary of $235,000 provided annually. The agreement also provides for a 6-month buyout for the remainder of the term, whichever is less, for a no-cause termination. The agreement provides for membership in CalPERS and the associated employer contribution rate as set by statute. And the agreement also provides for health benefits, vacation, and sick leave that is currently offered to other executive employees. Are there any board member comments? Okay, is there a motion to approve?
I just want to say I've known Nick for over 10 years, and I'm really excited that he's going to join us in this endeavor and brings with him the Department of Finance, fiscal conservancy, and analysis, and I think he's a welcome addition to the team. And with that, I'd like to move the item.
Second? Okay. Please call the roll.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Pam Haynes.
Aye.
Hildegard Aguinaldo.
Aye.
Amy Costa. Aye. Kevin Hall.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Aye.
Kim Perigo.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
Alexis Zaragoza.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. We'll now go to item 5.2, non-credit course outlines of record, review and approval. CEO Hiles.
Yes, hello. I would like to invite Rosalind to join us, and also Derek. Yeah, please. I'm sorry. Their titles are, Derek Gordon is the Chief Operations Officer, and Rosalind is our acting. Forget the actual title. It's accreditation liaison. Thank you. I didn't want to mess that up. Sorry. But they have been working tirelessly with our curriculum committee to get us the first version of our curriculum. So please welcome.
How would the committee like for us to begin?
You need to put on your mic.
Yeah, I think just give a brief overview about the process and where we've ended up.
Okay.
Sure. So first of all, I want to say that we have a new Chief Learning Officer, Audrey Heinesen, who is here and in the future will be the person speaking here, but I'm wrapping up my work with Roz and the instructional team, and it's been great.
I think Audrey should probably join us as well since she's here. Come on up. Oh, she's okay.
outside the room?
Okay.
So this process has been driven by a couple of imperatives. First, the legislation that created us that indicated that we should have 3 program pathways in place by July 1st, but also then through conversations with labor, SEIU, SAIU-HW, CSEA, others, learners themselves, other educators, employers who are seeking qualified talent, particularly talent that has industry-recognized certification, indicating mastery of competencies for upwardly mobile jobs. And so all of that together over the last year, our instructional team's been working together for the last year to get us to this point where we're able to put in front of you these course outlines of record and the addendum that is required for any distance education courses. So with that preamble, maybe I'll just turn it over to Roz, who's really done an extraordinary amount of work together with our instructional team to get us here. She gets the lion's share of the credit. So.
Well, we're a team that has worked very hard to pull this together, and I want to take a moment to thank the Academic Senate, the State Academic Senate, for their incredible support in helping us look at criteria that is necessary to be in full compliance with the legislation in Title V and Ed Code. Additionally, it was imperative that we, as a direct assessment CBE program, which I want to emphasize the difference because it was mentioned that CBE exists within the state, within programs, and that's true, but there are different types of CBE. What we're doing at Calbright is a non-duplicative program that is a direct assessment program in accordance with CFR 668.10, and that's the federal code that sets forth the criteria for establishing these programs in consultation with an accrediting agency, a national U.S. Department of Ed accrediting agency, which has the authority currently for approving those kinds of programs. The HEA now is looking at changing some of the legislation so that it will remains to be seen what will happen in October about the credit portion. So we did not submit the credit CORs for consideration now because we really need to see what happens with the HEA in October, whether it will go to ACCJC WASC for the final approval for the direct assessment, clock hour to credit hour conversion components of our credit programs, or if it will be vested for the first time under the authority of the U.S. Department of Ed. Hopefully, they will choose ACCJC. And ideally, we will have submitted, and as you know, we are working on our pre-accreditation application and utilizing resources and within ACCJC in order to facilitate that process. So a lot is happening. It's really exciting, and it was with those things in mind that we developed the initial course that you're looking at today, which are going to be focused on the online component of the self-paced direct assessment CBE programs. It does not include the apprenticeship, which is the face-to-face component, and the placement on the job site. That will come after we have the first cohorts go through the core of the programs. So the core programs are facilitated with in mind the industry relationships that have been facilitated by our CEO and others that are working furiously to negotiate and to put into place those kinds of opportunities that currently do not exist within the state and institutions of higher ed in the same way, with the primary focus being on short-term, self-paced, start when you can, which is also non-duplicative anywhere in the state, and within our systems of higher ed. We know proprietary schools do that all the time, and that's why we have so many of our students who are our primary focus falling into such heavy debt because they can complete some programs short-term. They can start at any time, and they finish faster. Well, we're doing that in a much more structured, confident partnership with industry, relationships that are built that will facilitate their entry into jobs and careers that have not existed previous to this new paradigm, which was so brilliantly thought, and we need to build in order to make sure that it works. And that is why this first review for the non-credit component is so important. While it is non-credit, and it does and will lead to the apprenticeship, which will come later, and which it will also lead to preparation for sitting for the certifications that are required for industry positions based on the pathway. AAPC, for example, is the curriculum core that you will see referenced in the cores that are before you for medical coding, and that is required for certification. So that core is there because just as with any other exam or certification that is required, you don't study outside of what is required. You use the materials that are required to pass the certification exam, and we want our students to be empowered to be successful and to pass that exam. The same with the CompTIA curriculum core that you'll see referenced on the IT materials or the course outlines of record are specific to what CompTIA wants in order to pass the A+ security exam. So we are being very intentional in the design of the course outlines of record so that students not only come into the course and are studying a multitude of things, they are specifically focused on doing what must be done in order to achieve success, in order to enter that industry and meet that criteria, and then working with their mentors from the industry, with counselors, with advisors that are threaded those services throughout the program. So with that in mind, I don't know if you want us to go through each one, or Heather, yes.
That was, I think, a very helpful overview. I wanted to add a couple of things that I think are not transparent to outsiders looking in. One is that this is the foundational starting kind of table stakes of knowledge that people must have in order to get into these jobs. But simultaneously, we are working with employers who say, hey, we have 20 competencies, 15 are hard skills, 5 are soft skills that one must possess in order to do this job. And what we're doing is then understanding those, and in some instances, we're actually co-developing particular competency-based education or assessments of those competencies with the employers, so that when our students come in, they could actually test out of competencies that they already possess. If I've got 10 of the 20 competencies already, I don't want to relearn those. I want to assess out of them and learn the 10 that I'm missing. And so this is a very different process in terms of curriculum development that has existed, even with the competency-based higher ed institutions that do that business today. And so this is really a new path we're building, we're blazing, but what we want to do is leverage all the resources that we can that gets everybody up and prepared while we're doing the co-development of the assessments and the curricula with our employers. But to Rosalind's point, to remind each other that remind ourselves that we've got to allow people to be self-paced and to obtain the competencies that they are lacking in order to get those jobs is our primary goal. And so we are working from the content that we could pull together to start to expedite our work with the employers to build these new training programs, and they are under construction right now. But we know that there are too many people who are suffering every day, and we've got to get this to people so they get better jobs as soon as humanly possible.
Member Costa.
I think it might be helpful for my colleagues, since we don't normally sit as a district, to actually take a step back and maybe explain the curriculum review and approval process and how this kind of fits into that process, because it's kind of the first time we're doing this. I imagine we will do this many more times as a board, but on the BOG, and I'm looking, some of my colleagues have more local experience, we don't normally hear these types of items. So just for context, and I think for the public, it might be helpful to take a step back and discuss that process.
As we've learned, my colleagues on the instructional team actually come from California community colleges. Most are either current or former faculty at California community colleges, and so they had real experience with this. But as I've learned, really it starts with the subject matter experts who are developing the curriculum, and as Heather pointed out, in consultation with industry, with labor, with the actual learners themselves. And also in our process, in consultation with state academic senate representatives who've been helpful in sort of helping us to determine Title V requirements and all the other things that go along with it. We then bring it to our local curriculum committee, which is also a tradition at all community colleges. It often then goes to the local senate. It goes to then the board of trustees. And then finally, it goes to the chancellor's office, and the chancellor's office provides the last level of review. What we have heard is that for some colleges, this whole process can take sometimes up to 2 years. And so one of the things that Heather's really sort of challenged us to do is to think about how it is that we, are doing this with the same rigor, but at scale with a lot more velocity. So did I miss any of that? Did I get anything that wrong?
No, that was a great overview. I would just add that when all of the independent faculty contractors were hired, we were then at the time under the administrative processes identified as the faculty who would comprise the curriculum committee. There are two phases. There is the subject matter expert in the pathway division who chairs the review among that faculty. All of the content area experts that will be working in that area put together the initial protocols. They looked at and examined, scores of different options and alternatives, and were sure to include a review that excluded any programs that were in existence within our system. And they put forth that recommendation or those recommendations to the full curriculum committee, which is comprised of representatives from all of the divisions, IT, of course, 21st century essential skills, and medical coding. And then that was approved and reviewed by not only the Calbright faculty contractors, but also by the academic senate representatives to ensure that we were ticking all the boxes and making sure that everything was appropriately reviewed. As is the case with many California community colleges, the curriculum committee can be a separate committee from those processes from the actual Senate committee. But the voice of the Senate and their expertise in serving as a resource was really critical to our success. So although we were operating under that capacity, we were taking under full account those recommendations and used their information and materials that are published on the ASCCC site. And of course, there's the program handbook for courses and curricula that I can certainly share to the board or send so that you have that resource available. But we made sure that we were in total compliance with all of the criteria set forth in Title V.
I think you'll find that in every aspect of this college, we are learning how it is traditionally done, and then we're learning how we will do it moving forward. So it's very human intensive, and there's a huge learning curve with every single thing we're doing right now until such time as we build systems that work efficiently and work for our needs. Our Chief Learning Officer, Audrey, will have a streamlined under, kind of well-established development cycle for curricula as soon as we're able to figure out how that process is supposed to work. And we will be able to be more articulate about how the process works, so that you guys know what you're looking at when you're looking at it. We're just getting our team in place so we can build those systems.
I just want to thank you for the amazing amount of work that went into this and the level of collaboration that you just described that included faculty. But my first question for you, and there are several, does your curriculum committee include a curriculum specialist, a classified support person who's very familiar with the program and course approval handbook, that understands the data elements that they're going to be asked to submit to the chancellor's office? We
just added a new faculty program expert who was a former Senate chair on her campus, and she is very familiar with and actually designed several of the core forms that are being used by the state, and she is definitely an expert in that regard and will be working very, very closely with us. Her name is Laurie Huffman, Dr. Laurie Huffman from Los Medranos.
So another faculty person.
Yes.
What about that instrumental classified person that is very familiar with the curriculum in terms of inputting it into the system? We normally refer to them as curriculum specialists.
Yes, we're recruiting for.
We don't have someone in place.
positions,
It's kind of been me right now, but we need to recruit for that and hire that position.
Excellent, because I was so privileged with permission of President Epstein to attend the ASCCC Curriculum Institute the last several days over the weekend and sat in on a number of different breakout sessions that introduced me to elements that as a faculty member I was not necessarily as familiar with as my curriculum specialist was. And one of the things that I was able to do is take that knowledge that I just gained last weekend weekend, last week and last weekend, and apply it to the CORs that are before us today. And this is where I have just a couple of questions regarding the 4 courses that we're seeing on the non-credit side. You first mentioned that this is the non-credit, that there will be credit equivalents to these courses that will be
Yes.
coming through?
They will be
Excellent.
mirrored.
Because on the non-credit course outline of records, I didn't notice units, and that would not be appropriate because it's on the non-credit side. But I also noticed that it didn't give me any indication of the number of hours that students would be anticipated to do the work that's included in the course outline of record. That's something that I believe a curriculum specialist would have caught if it had gone through the review, because they'd be familiar with how that information would need to get into the system.
That's an excellent question, and that's where some of the processes will be different for Calbright than they are in the traditional model, because in self-paced direct assessment protocols, they're built like independent study. So we don't limit or put mandates on how long the student can take. They can complete it as fast as they want, minimally 10 weeks, or take as long as they want to complete the process or the program. We will, in the advisory component, which at the very beginning, an ed plan or an educational agreement is required by the U.S. Department of Ed for any direct assessment protocols because of that reason, where it is determined based on what the student has agreed to with the content specialist in the area, what will be required relative to their completion. And it will also add any supports that are not realized in the actual core pathway. For example, a student who is a second language speaker would then be given the option of adding to that progression ESL, and or a student who is not strong in math and or the sciences and needs to have some additional support in the area of anatomy, physiology, or any of the sciences that will strengthen their ability to progress appropriately through the medical coding program, would have those processes added. So that's the beauty of a direct assessment program, is it is not married to a timeline, and it is also no term. So we have a different calendar that does not currently exist within the system. It is a no-term calendar based on the CFR. It is complete at your own pace. The self-paced component becomes extremely important in the differentiation between what we're doing and what exists. And our course outlines of record and our policies and procedures within the system do not accommodate for any of those nuances in direct assessment. So ideally, we will be proposing and putting forth forms for you to review as for the Board of Governors to review, that will address those special nuances within the guidelines that are set forth for direct assessment CDE.
You just mentioned the word advisory, and that was something else that I found in the COR, is that your advisories for these courses are, I anticipate, other courses, and I didn't see those courses here as well. Is it normally part of protocol to approve a subsequent course when the initial course hasn't been presented?
The advisories are not courses necessarily, and those that you have before you, there are no advisories that are courses. The advisories, for example, are for literacy, ability to read, write, and speak at a high school and or college level would be an example of an advisory. So the student will know that if they are deficient in those communication skills, that they would want to take advantage or avail themselves of OEI resources, and that would help them through that process. It will also give us the ability to map them with a mentor that is going to have strengths and the ability to help provide some additional supports. So there are no prerequisites. The advisories, we want students to know that it's going to require that they have some proficiencies before they come into the pathway. We don't want them to be caught off guard. So the way that they will also know is through self-assessments that occur upon entry. And they are given the option of taking those self-assessments as skill builders so that we can then map them to some of the OEI resources and supports through tutoring, through supplemental instruction, that are all voluntary, but will be required in order to be successful.
Thank you very much. My last question then, the concept of program pathways keeps coming up. So I'm looking at like a COR for medical coding for professional services. This, I'm guessing, is one course in a program, which would be a collection of courses to which there's an advisory called Healthcare Essentials, which you just explained is not necessarily a course. Where does this then fit into that program pathway?
Thank you for asking that question, because it gives me the ability to address several things that I think are unclear for most people that are looking at what we're doing. We don't offer courses. They are modules. Modules are equivalent to courses in the sense that they are mapped to student learning outcomes. Those student learning outcome competencies then are the criteria that are used to assess mastery. And so when we compare what our modules are doing to a course that's offered that's equivalent, because we also had to be careful to ensure that what we were developing is equivalent to what's happening in brick and mortar campuses, but in a self-paced, directed independent study way. So we might have 3 student learning outcomes in a module that are mapped to competencies that appear in 1 or 2 courses that might be offered in a traditional campus. And when we look at the mapping of competencies, one brick and mortar course may have 2 competencies that one module may have 2 or 3 competencies embedded in. But when we look at what happens relative to the content and the mastery of the competency, they are the same. So that is the difference. And that's a very, very major difference in the beauty of what we're designing and what we're doing right now.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer my questions.
Thanks
I
for the
appreciate it.
Thank you. Trustee Perrigo.
I wanted to do a follow-up because I'm not quite understanding why this doesn't need an hour range on it. Even independent studies have an articulated amount of hours that the student is expected, and I get that this is open entry, open exit, so maybe there isn't a term surrounding it that the student must complete the course in this time frame, but there should still be an expectation, should there not, about how many hours the course or the competency or whatever it is that they're engaged in might take them to complete.
And when we are meeting with the student to develop the enrollment agreement that I mentioned, we take into account all of the advisories, everything that the student has agreed to do. So it's done on an individual basis. So my reference to the minimum of 10 weeks, or it may be as long as 6 to 8 months, is the time frame that a student might fall in. But there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for every student, because every student is going to be different. Credit for prior learning, assessments that they place out of, the skill sets that they come in with, the competencies that they complete. Even when they go into the pathway, if they are coming from an environment in IT, for example, where they have been not formally certified, but they've been doing the job, they will breeze through that competency. For something that is new, they will take their time. So we don't set a standard time limit on completion of the modules that would be the equivalent of completing a course. We instead give them an idea of how long, based on all of the data, and this is another unique criteria for, in terms of pulling together the credit evaluation, the articulation agreements, the advanced standing, the PLA, is all done coming in the door. That is something that typically does not happen within the California Community College system for admissions. But we are doing it when they come through the door, so that for every student, it becomes very specialized. And that student then will know, and they will agree that this is what the expectation is based on what's in that enrollment agreement. So it means a lot of work on our part coming through the door, but it's also required by the Federal Code of Federal Regulations that agreement be set in place specifically because of things like that, so that the student knows what to expect. And not only what we anticipate the hours might be or the timeline might be, but what else they might need in order to complete, in order to be successful. So that is very different, and it's what makes the direct assessment protocols very unique. So that means that we will have 100 people in the program, we might have 100 different statements about how long this is going to take you. And then after doing that, they may end up doing something very different based on their ability to complete the program.
And even that makes perfect sense to me, but it's still, I'm not quite because I believe it's embedded in ed code even for non-credit, that there's at least a range of hours that a course would or a program would take, even in non-credit. So that's just something I'm uncomfortable about with the core right now. It's just, and if there's a federal guideline or something that makes this different, it's just something that I'm struggling with because I'm unaware of, and I appreciate your description, but I still feel like to be in compliance, there would be an element there
Trustee,
of at least a range of
May we
hours.
do some research into that
Yeah,
matter and get
that'd
back
be
to you?
great.
Thank you.
And I can find the specific ed code that I'm referring as well, just for reference.
And I can also send you the Code of Federal Regulations. And it also speaks to clock to credit hour conversion happening after the student completes the work because of that reason.
Okay.
So it's
And
Happy
then
to send that.
the other thing that I just wanted to ask very quickly, because as I read the college's self-assessment, and you brought it up here about students being able to get through faster, are you saying faster because you would be assessing what competencies they already have and don't need to develop, or what about this curriculum uniquely makes it faster?
Well, it's faster because it's self-paced. So a student who is in a classroom environment has to wait to move forward because you take examinations, you have assessments, you have specific things that have to be done at specific times. In this environment, it depends on the student. So it may be faster because the student is able to progress through it faster. And I'll give you an example. To test the waters, I took a CBE direct assessment course through Harvard edX, and they said the same general statement that it may take 6 to 8 months, which all of our literature says. Overall, it may take, these programs are 6 to 8 months. But for me, when I read that, I thought, and they said, but you may get through it faster. So I went through the program protocols and finished the course in a weekend. And the reason was I picked something that I knew because I didn't really want to study. And
But
I just read
the
through
opposite
it.
is also true. It could be that folks go through very slowly.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it could
and I
be
think
it could be
that's-
completed very quickly,
Yeah.
or the opposite. It could be very slowly.
Yeah. And
We've
I-
also found that when people are learning specific skills for a particular job, there's a certain amount of resonance and focus and motivation to acquire those so that they can go to the apprenticeship phase and get the job. And in my experience in building welfare to work training programs, I had people who were reading at an 8th grade level, doing math at a 6th grade level, brought those up, plus learned all the competencies for the job because they needed to get the job done. And so that's our hope, is the streamlined focus on the competencies tied to a job helps people get the momentum.
Thank you.
But it does have to be a minimum of 10 weeks. That is set forth in the guidelines. They cannot complete in less than 10 weeks, any program.
Trustee Costa.
This has been really helpful, Roz, and I'm going to jump ahead a little bit and say I think some of these specifics really need to be in the milestone report. I think here you've done a really nice job of giving specific examples about it being as little as 10 weeks, the difference between courses and modules, and based on public comment, we really need to do a more meaningful job of expressing that, and I think it should be incorporated in the milestone report. Thank you.
You know, one of the challenges for us is we're still building things, and so it's much easier to report once we're at the completion of building it. And I think what we're finding is this thing where we need to report out before we've completed. And so I think, you know, there's no doubt in my mind, 6 months from now, as things are going and we've completed what the full training trajectory looks like for the first cohort, we'll be much more articulate in all of our reporting. So I'll just ask for a little bit of patience as we continue to build, and then we'll be much better at explaining how we do it.
I think we need to be pretty specific in the milestone report, and I can speak to that when we get to that item.
So I would agree with that. I think that it will be a missed opportunity. The document is addressed to the governor, to the Senate Pro Tem, and to the that man I used to work for. But it is going to have a huge distribution of folks sort of outside of that sphere, but really wanting to know what this is all about. And there are a number of terms, there are a number of areas that there needs to be some descriptors of. we need to make certain that this is a document that answers the questions that we already know are out there. So I would agree that this explanation that you just gave is a long way in helping those who are not those who are in opposition, but even those who just don't know what the differences are. So I would agree that we need to reread this relative to, there's some assumptions that we know some of these terms, and we don't. We can't make that assumption.
Okay, any other board comment? I believe we have a public comment.
John Stanskis?
I'm still John Stanskis with the Academic Senate. I did have a few things to address because I'm concerned that some of the dialogue that just happened here is part of the frustration you might be feeling with the field, and to clarify a few issues. Board Member Grande, advisories do not have to be courses. However, it is usually incumbent upon the institution to advise students where they can reach those competencies or advisories or prerequisites or co-requisites if they do not offer them. And so sometimes there are advisories to courses that do not look like another course, and that's okay. To see that, Title V, Section 55002C2 requires hours, a range of hours on every course. Students do not have to meet those hours. They can finish much faster or much slower, but it's the expected range of hours that your typical student would potentially need to complete it. And that is part of Title V. I don't think it's in Ed Code. It is in Title V, though. And I would caution the use of the word independent study, because independent study does exist in guidance and procedures from the Chancellor's office. It generates less apportionment, so I wouldn't call it that, because I think the goal is to generate apportionment as these courses are offered, the reason everything in the other 114 colleges are called a course is because there is no provision to call them anything else in Title V. And so we talk about modularized curriculum, but in the actual official name, it's called a course, a self-paced course or a variable hour course with a range given. And some of the issues about the calendar are addressed for an approval that happened 2 years ago by the Board of Governors to allow a change in the grading policy such that a
30 seconds.
satisfactory progress grade was allowed, so that the student who was enrolled in a self-paced, modularized mathematics course who was not finished at the end of the regular term, because the calendar mechanism requires all of us to use this calendar, that the instructor doesn't have to give them a non-passing grade. At the end, they can say they are making satisfactory progress toward achieving the outcomes required. So I just think that there's some clarity around that. I'm sorry the faculty that we appointed didn't catch the variable hours required on the course outline of record. You're probably right. A curriculum specialist would have caught that because it's a required entry field for the Chancellor's office approval.
Thank you very much. That was helpful. Any other board comment?
May I respond to one of the issues, because I think this is something that will continuously come back. And thank you, John, for bringing that up. And that's one of the challenges that we as a faculty are faced with. The new criteria in Ed Code for the establishment of the college provided specificity to the kind of courses that we were going to be developed or programs. And the reference to CBE, direct assessment, is the only place where it really exists within Ed Code. So with that said, there are some things, if we're following that criteria, that will be different, which would necessitate a review. But based on what was approved for us, and he referenced the calendar criteria as well, CBE direct assessment is the non-duplicative program that we're talking about in CFR 668.10, says direct assessment of student learning means a measure by the institution of what a student knows and can do in terms of the body of knowledge making up the educational program. These measures provide evidence that a student has command of a specific subject, content area, or skill that the student demonstrates a specific quality such as creativity, analysis, or synthesis associated with the subject matter of the program. And then it goes on to give examples. So there are no grades, it is mastery, and there is no calendar outside of, and the Federal Code of Regulations allows the no-term calendar, and it also provides specificity with a financial aid calendar when we reach accreditation status that would allow us to do disbursements, not on a traditional semester, but on a different calendar that spans over a year and a half. So it would run across multiple terms because of the self-paced component. Any reference earlier to independent was to show an example of what people know. But we are self-paced direct assessment, CBE, and the only thing that is familiar is to refer to it as like an independent student going through a program independently. It is not an independent study program. It's still CBE direct assessment.
Thank you. Yes, certainly, Vice President.
So I want to make certain that I understand this piece. Because CBE is embedded within a federal definition and criteria, which it seems to me we can follow. And I'm not certain who I'm supposed to be asking this question of. There might not be the two who are sitting here. To what extent is there a conflict in Title V? Or is there not a conflict because we have the ability, given where we are going and the mandate of the legislation, that we're not in conflict? And so if you can't answer it now, it would be helpful to understand that piece of it.
Actually, I can only speak for my position with working on the curriculum and developing and doing research in these protocols. I see it as an opportunity and not a conflict at all. Things are changing. We're getting emails and contact from people around the country saying, looking at what we're doing, the government is giving grants to institutions of higher ed who are developing and working on protocols to address these very issues. Ideally, we will be one of those institutions that will be setting forth criteria and setting a model for public institutions of higher education to develop standards for implementation. There are criteria in place. Even the approval and vetting process is very different from anything that we've seen before. That is why it's vested with the regional accrediting agency and/or the Secretary of Education. We've never had to do that before with any of our programs in the same way, and especially as a public institution who has the authority vested in you to make those decisions. But the way that the standards is set forth, and there are questions about federal code and where it places, we all are subject to the authority that is vested in federal code if we want Title IV funding. So any institution of higher ed that does not follow, we can say we won't follow CFR and do it differently without changing what we're doing now. Or we can change it to come up to the standards and the protocols that are being established throughout the country and the nation to be a pioneer and or map the road to success for other programs that are looking to us for leadership, and they really are. But any institution, including any of our 114, who does not follow CFR can decide not to, which is the position that we would be placed in. And what is the result? Your students don't get federal financial aid. Fine, don't follow it, but you don't get Title IV. So our students are the population that absolutely will need Title IV. they need the resources and the funding and the allocations that are afforded students who can benefit greatly from having those opportunities to pull themselves out of poverty and to get better, high-paying jobs that will create for them a pathway to the future. So that's what we're faced with.
Thank you. Any other member, Rawlings?
Well, I'd like to put a finer point on some of that, maybe. So we have an opportunity to follow CFR. We have the opportunity to follow some of what we traditionally done in Ed Code and Title V. I just want to really make sure that we get some advice back about, Title V is the regulations that we set that every college in the system follows. And I just wonder, do we need to make some flexibility within Title V to clarify that they could follow CFR or follow what we've traditionally been doing? Or does the statute that we've been created under create that exemption for us that it doesn't create for the other 114? Because part of what I'm concerned about is that if we're creating programs here that can be very impactful on people's lives, that we are able to scale it through the other 114 as well. So if we're creating exceptions for ourselves, we need to be able to create exceptions for the 114 so we can really get these 8 million folks through into these higher standards of living.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
Okay, so we can consult. We can consult with our law firm on this. I don't know if they have an answer immediately or they'd rather research it. They'd rather research it. Okay, so we'll get back on that question at the next. Unless I see someone standing in the back.
Would you state your name again for us?
I remain John Stanskus with the Academic Senate. So to meet your timeline, I think you need to approve these. And if you approve them the way they're written, the chancellor's office will reject them because they don't list the hours. That's the only reason that I can see on there. So I would suggest that as the Board of Trustees, you provisionally approve these, given that you expect them to be returned to the curriculum committee to fill out the missing field before they're submitted to the chancellor's office for a control number. The control number allows you to offer the course and then be eligible for financial aid and things like that, because I don't see how else you can do that here.
That's a good idea. Will you do this first?
All right,
I'm trying to help you.
Thank you. I'm trying to figure out then how we can move forward as quickly as possible. Is it possible for us to approve this under the condition that this hour criteria be added prior to submission to the chancellor's office? Is that I'm getting a nod from our
Mr. President, may I
counsel.
make a suggestion, which is that you can make a motion to approve it in principle and direct staff to work on any technical aspects required for approval.
That's beautiful.
Is that a motion?
Yes, it is.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Please call the roll.
Tom Epstein,
Aye.
Pamela Haynes,
Aye.
Hildegard Aguinaldo,
Aye.
Amy Costa, Kevin Hall,
Aye.
Jolina Grande,
Aye.
Kim Perigo,
Aye.
Bill Rawlings,
Aye.
Blas Villalobos, Alexis Zaragoza,
Aye.
Thank you, and I want to commend Professor Haley for doing such a detailed answers to our questions. I appreciate it. Okay, item 5.3, curricula contract approvals, CompTIA.
Derek, is there someone coming to speak to this contract? Yeah.
Okay, so this is a request to approve the curriculum contract for both of our IT pathways, cybersecurity as well as IT fundamentals, A+. As Roz was sharing with you earlier, we worked with employers and did lots of market research, principally through Indeed.com, but other job posting boards, to see which industry-recognized certifications would best prepare our adult learners to actually get jobs when they're done with their training and development. And it over and over again, CompTIA came up as the leading industry recognized certification for these professions. We've done some extensive negotiation with them under the guidance of our procurement specialists that we've been working with, and so present this for your consideration.
Okay, any questions from the board? Trustee Costa?
I just don't know what any of this means, to be honest with you. I mean, I keep going back to this question of, are we different? And I guess my fundamental question will be, are there other colleges in California right now that offer a CompTIA certificate?
I don't know the answer to that specific question. Do you, Russ?
Yes, there are. But what makes us different? And there are, to preface the statement, it's important to look at the program types that exist within our system and the length of time that it takes for a student to complete them. In competition with proprietary schools that have a shorter time frame, who are really taking en masse large numbers of students that exceed what our entire system is doing relative to CompTIA enrollment. CompTIA is required in this industry. We have the market share for technology and literally thousands of positions that are available. So it is really a very provocative and interesting pathway to a very secure future with a high salary. The difference is that in order to compete and to provide opportunities for our students in the target market that we are recruiting, we have to be able to deliver those programs and services in a meaningful way that would expedite and or facilitate the process by which they are eligible to sit for and take and pass the A+ exam, for example, and then go into a position. So that is what's not duplicative. Any MD, for example, can go to any medical school and get an MD degree. And how they get to that pathway might be different in terms of how it's offered, if it's offshore, if it's domestic, et cetera. The difference being, how is it facilitated and how does it meet the needs of the students that we're recruiting, our learners, and or how does it lead to a secure future? So the A+ exam, bottom line, is required. They have to sit for that certification no matter where they go, and anyone and everyone is going to lead them to that end result for certification. What has to be done differently is what we are doing.
That's right.
And that is the industry relationships, the preparation, the short-term self-paced mentorship, apprenticeship model that is being totally revamped and redeveloped and redesigned with components that have never existed in any program within our system. And that's what makes it different.
Trustee Rawlings.
So, Ross, probably for you pretty quick. Not directly on the contract itself, but we're having this contract with CompTIA using their curriculum. If we're using their certification, using a curriculum, I think it just makes sense. But in the program itself, and as the students are experiencing this, are we adding on additional soft skills trainings that the employers are looking for?
Oh, yes. And those soft skills, you want to speak to this? Because I know you're so passionate about it.
Yeah, so this is a component of the module, or this may be a module on its own, that then adding on other modules is creating the program that we're really looking at, right?
So one of the CORs that you just approved is the Essentials curriculum, which really addresses exactly your question. And we have both generalized as well as contextualized soft skills training and development that we're going to be offering. So the contextualized will look a little different for medical coding, for instance, than it would for IT fundamentals, but it's been absolutely a clear requirement of all employers that folks, when they show up ready to work, have those harder to define but absolutely essential skills that will make them successful in the workplace. And so we've rigorously been designing sort of a parallel learning pathway in addition to their core pathway to ensure that they arrive at that job with those really important skills.
And I would add that Pam Sanborn, who is the chair for medical coding, is also here. And she did a remarkable job last fall meeting with SEIU, United Healthcare Workers, Kaiser, a number of industry representatives, where they were very, very clear in outlining specifically what competencies we must include in our program development to ensure that their needs as an industry are being met as we start to train and prepare students for positions. And it was with that commitment that we were able to develop a relationship. So Pam did a fabulous job in facilitating that and was able to manage those. That was a really tough crowd. But it certainly took under consideration all of those issues and concerns.
Any other board comments? No? Any comments from the public? Okay. Is that? No, he's. Okay. Okay. Then I need a motion.
Move to approve.
Mr. Rawlings.
Second.
Seconded by Vice President Haynes. Please call the roll.
Tom Epstein,
Aye.
Pam Haynes,
Aye.
Hildegarde Aguinaldo, Amy Costa,
Aye.
Kevin Hall,
Aye.
Jolena Grande,
Aye.
Kim Perigo,
Aye.
Bill Rawlings,
Aye.
Blas Villalobos, Alexis Zaragoza,
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. Okay, the next item is the fiscal year budget approval.
I'd like to invite Julian to come up, please. Julian Roberts. As a reminder, Julian Roberts has been our interim CE and acting CFO as we've been on the search for our permanent person. And I wanted to take this opportunity to thank him for amazing work and to helping us get to this point in time.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So thank you. You've just done an exceptional job for us.
Yeah, thank you very much.
So today, I will just start by saying there aren't any substantive material differences to the budget that you tentatively approved beforehand. But I still wanted to make sure that if you had any other pressing questions about the budget, that you could take this other opportunity to ask those questions.
Yes.
No, not you.
I know it's a shocker, the person from finance.
Trustee Costa.
I do think things have changed. We went through a pretty arduous budget process, and I have to say, that it became pretty clear to me that there was some concern about the balances that we have left based upon the appropriation schedule offered in the Budget Act. And as such, I really do think that, again, previewing the milestone report, I want to see an appropriation for student outreach, not student marketing, student outreach for underrepresented minority students. And it needs to be incorporated in our budget, and we can't sit on balances. And I certainly, Heather and I have had a lot of conversations. I understand that we're scaling up, but, I'm not comfortable supporting the budget as it is because it lacks any recognition of what we heard from our legislative partners during the budget process. And I think we need to incorporate what we heard. There are primary investors. And, one area for me, and, the board members may have other ideas, is around student outreach. I think we need probably, a more robust investment there, especially when we get to this first cohort of students. And, to ensure that we're reaching out to populations that are more difficult to reach out to, because of language issues or socioeconomic issues. And so for me personally, at this point, I'm not prepared to approve the same budget that we heard a month ago in the absence of the information we heard from the legislature.
I would like to speak to that. In addition, although we have not specified every way in which we intend to do outreach, I think that in the milestone report, it does describe everything from social media to in-person organizing, and we have factored into our budget working with faith-based organizations, community-based organizations, other influencers in communities, other grassroots and guerrilla, if you will, outreach methodologies. And we are just starting this week to have in-person meetings with members from CSEA and SEIU in order to start listening and doing outreach within the membership of those unions. So I'm very surprised, honestly, that that doesn't seem like a sufficient response to what we're doing for student outreach.
I don't see a line item in the budget that specifies what the appropriation is for that particular exercise, and that's what I'm looking for.
I believe there is. So let's see. I think it's on page 6 of the. Excuse me. Let's see. We have that on page 7 of the PDF that was sent to you in the key drivers for the one-time fund operating expenses, where we have $1 million for building awareness and research and campaigns, and then $3 million for
really quick.
Sure.
That's not student outreach. I mean, I think anybody who has been in higher ed would tell you that student outreach has a very specific term to many people. And that is embodied in programs like CalSOAP and Puente, and there's a wide range. And, for me personally, it just doesn't, research, that's not quite what I have in mind. And candidly, I don't think it was the legislative intent when it was put in the bill either.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just literally missing what type of outreach is missing in the report or the budget that you're speaking to. I understand other programs. Is that what you're speaking to? Is it outreach to other programs?
I don't know what it is, but I'm going to tell you in the milestone report, like websites, social media, that is not within the traditional purview of student outreach. Student outreach, and I encourage my other board members, to disagree with me or agree with me, has to do with reaching out to people who are traditionally not served or don't see college as a viable pathway. And that is more than advertising. That has to do with really showing them that college is a viable pathway through multilingual approaches, through different geographic approaches throughout the state. I think that's not what I'm seeing in the milestone report. And even the line item that you're referencing, I don't see student outreach in that line item. And clearly enrollment and marketing will be another issue for the college to address, and I'm not in any way dismissing that. I just view student outreach as something fundamentally different.
Vice President Haynes.
So I am absolutely supportive relative to where Board of Trustees member Acosta is going. But I guess I have a very different perspective. But I truly understand the concern. As a trustee in another community college district, and among community colleges, there's not nearly enough money that goes relative to really digging into communities, in particular communities of color. So I understand that angst. But what I saw in the report that we're going to speak to as an information item is a huge amount of things that are going to be done differently relative to communities of color, relative to immigrants, relative to those who are monolingual as opposed to speaking more than one language. And what's important to me is this differentiation of who we identify as a student and who we identify as an adult learner. Because I really think that we have, in many cases, we have an idea of who our students are, and they're really not. And then we have an idea of what an adult learner is, but we've never called them that, and therefore we are envisioning a very different person, someone who's 25 years to 34 years of old in terms of who we're going to market to, folks of color, folks who are in jobs, folks who are out of jobs, and then identify through knowing and learning who those folks are who are influencers to those folks. And I think that, quite generally speaking, community colleges, and I'll only speak of mine, have done a piss poor job of really getting to those particular students, those particular adult learners. And some of the ideas embedded within that probably need to be etched out with some definition of what is meant by some of the terms we're using is going to be really key. And I use my two eldest granddaughters. One is 22 and the other is 20, and what they use in terms of where they get their information. And it ain't the Sacramento Bee or the LA Times. And so there's a pivot, and the pivot is not just knowing that there are all of these digital tools that we can use, but then how to use them and what that message is. What's the compelling message? My message to my granddaughter is very different than what the message of one of her peers is going to be, and so, and there's got to be. And we are in a position in this process to use a lot more funding to do this. Now, it may not be seen in this $1 million because it's not nearly enough, but we're at the beginning phase of this. And there's going to be a lot more that has to be done. But I see the framework, the skeleton of doing that. And so I'm warmed by that. I can't think of another adjective, but I'm positive about where we're going to head relative to some of those tools.
Trustee Rawlings.
So I absolutely get Trustee Costa's point, although I would point out that with a lot of what we're doing, the funding for it will be spread across multiple budget line items. And just for me, on the classified side, we do student outreach in a traditional way at our colleges. And I don't think, on one, that the traditional outreach is going to be effective, right? Because, typically your outreach specialists are going to high schools and you might be going to job fairs and that kind of thing. That's not what we're going to be able to do here. But I would point out that it is incredibly people intensive, right? If you really want to get out into these communities, you need a person to get into those communities and meet those influencers and actually have those, in a lot of cases, one-on-one conversations that is incredibly person intensive. And so when I see, 88% of the budget is on personnel, I am hoping that a good portion of that is on people that are going to be able to really create the kind of outreach that we need to do. And then hopefully using social media, just using it as a kind of a force multiplier in a way, right? But really it's that one-on-one, the people conversations I think are going to be the most important part of this. So I'm hoping we're dedicating part of the personnel budget for that.
I'd be happy to respond to that. Indeed, that is the essence of it. I think in today's society, I make the assumption that there is no there is no strong people-based community if it isn't also reinforced with social media and with technology. But I'm just accustomed to seeing both virtual as well as in-person communities building upon each other. I think that's how it works these days. And I couldn't agree more. If we don't have human beings who influence and affect each other, we will fail. But we have heard from some traditional players in the student outreach space who work with traditional community colleges who really are struggling to understand how to better boost enrollment, how to reach out to people in non-traditional ways. And I'm watching other non-traditional organizations be very effective at enrolling and engaging people. And so I think we can't afford to not use any type of tool that's available to us in the toolkit today.
Trustee Rawlings.
So I would ask maybe for you to explore, as far as ideas, having folks that have community organizing backgrounds, organizations like Lane down in Los Angeles,
Yes.
those types of groups that are
Yes.
really getting into community empowerment, having those as partners, I think would be very valuable.
Yes, and in fact, we are later today. I'm meeting with some of our friends with SEIU and others. So we're definitely of that perspective. Again, I'll remind you, we need a team in place so that we can deploy and get people out there on the ground and in the communities talking with folks. And that's exactly our newest priority is starting that work. And you've been very helpful to us, Trustee Rawlings. Thank you.
Trustee Zaragoza.
Well, if you are going to be implementing those kind of measures, I would like to see that maybe more reflected in the report to show that that's what we're going to be doing. Because a lot of this is social media and that kind of thing. But if we are going to have people on the ground a lot more, then I would like to see it reflected in the plan.
Sure. You'll probably see more of it reflected also in our position descriptions as we're hiring people to do that outreach.
So can I make a couple clarifying technical points?
Sure.
So from obviously, this is a startup budget, so we're building the plane as we're flying it in some ways. Secondly, the time in statute in which the final budget must be approved is September 15th. So this is typically much earlier compared to other community colleges in which a final budget is presented. Thirdly, the Board of Trustees also reviews the financials on a quarterly basis and has the ability to make adjustments to the budget based on a majority vote of Board of Trustees. So as Calbright is moving forward in its operations and is learning more and is developing more, those adjustments to the budget can be made based on recommendations from the staff and approved by yourselves.
Okay, thank you. So I think the staff has gotten ample input.
Yep.
And since the budget does not have to be approved today, I would recommend that we put it over to the next executive committee meeting in August. Does that work for?
Yeah, and based on Ms. Heil's comments, I think we're missing a crosswalk between the budget and what's in the milestone report. So you guys clearly have a $1 million in appropriations in the budget. You have several programs listed in the milestone report. I think it would be helpful to crosswalk those documents with the exact appropriations and dollar amounts that are laid out in the milestone report and how it rolls up to the $1 million.
Okay, so we will put this item over till the August executive committee meeting. Thanks. Okay, I see people coming and going. Maybe we should take a quick break and reconvene at 11.